just give me your reaction to the first time you heard the news. I don't know if the first time was yesterday when it was announced. I know it's something that was rumored, but when it was digested, this is when the Glen was going to race or when the Glen was going to host NASCAR. What do you think?
Yeah, I wasn't a fan. I heard about it yesterday, and two things immediately came to mind. First and foremost, not the weather necessarily, but Mother's Day. That's a big issue for a lot of people. And so I immediately thought of the poor timing with that. And then, secondarily, the weather situation. Now, do I expect it to snow on May 10th? No, I don't. However, what a lot of people are not talking about is the ground throughout the Finger Lakes is saturated in early May. I know that because I'm probably in the Finger Lakes more than anybody with my cameras, and especially that time of year between winter snow melt and spring rain runoff and everything else, the grounds at the track will be saturated. The grounds at Watkins Glen State Park will be saturated. Heck, the park mostly isn't even open till later in May. And so a lot of people go to Watkins Glen to camp who attend that race, like thousands of people. And so I don't think they factored any of that in this decision, to be honest with you.
Talk about the camping part of it more because, like you said, yeah, Mother's Day being the day of the Cup race is one thing, but it's
Mhm.
not just the Cup race. It's the Xfinity, it's the trucks, it's qualifying. Like you said, people get there on Thursday night and stay for the whole weekend. Separate of what the ground is going to be like, how much less likely is Watkins Glen going to be attracting tourists in the middle of May, where school is still in session, things are still going on, as opposed to August, which is the middle of summer, the heart of vacation season around here?
Yeah, it's an epic fail from that standpoint. I mean, I did a post last night just kind of going off on this, and it reached a lot of people. And I think I got like 2,200 comments on the thing. And a lot of them were, we are simply not renewing our tickets for next year because they have kids. To your point, they're in school. I can tell you the wineries in early May are not in tourism mode. I mean, the whole thing just it's not pleasant. I understand some of what NASCAR is doing, shuffling the schedule. I don't pay attention to it like I did back in my sports days, obviously, but I did pretty much cover 25, 30 years of races there, beginning in 1987, which was the second year I believe that NASCAR raced there. I think they began in 86. And, I just, the sport has gone downhill in my view ever since Dale Earnhardt passed at Daytona, and the ratings from or lack thereof reflect that. I think you see a lot of empty seats at these venues, including Watkins Glen. But Watkins Glen traditionally has pretty good crowds in August, and especially this year's race. I did check on it. The race was horribly boring. I watched like the last 20 laps or so, and it was almost unwatchable. But they had a decent number of people there. And August, they're so entrenched with that, decades and decades of that being a fixture on the calendar. People plan their entire summers or vacations around it. Not just New York State, people from Pennsylvania, people from the New England states, people from Ohio. I mean, this is the Northeast we're talking about. And it's an abrupt move. And then you throw in the whole weather concern. And there are concerns. I mean, Thad, 5 years ago, I shot 2 to 3 inches of snow down in the southern tier on May 9th. And I did post a picture on that in my comments to my post last night on my page. So, and it got a lot of reaction. It can do that around these parts. Now, it hasn't lately, but we know better. And so, I was really stunned that they made this move. And I kind of liken it to what the LPGA in a different form did when they pulled out of Rochester in Corning and the smaller communities that supported that circuit forever in hopes that the bigger markets would bring great returns to them, and it simply did not happen. And now the LPGA is barely a blip on anyone's radar.
One of the reasons I want to talk to you is because, to your point, you did cover this extensively a while ago. And there was a point not that long ago when NASCAR even coming to the Glen at all was a question. And that's one of the things I thought about with this yesterday, that the era of the Glen begging NASCAR, what seemed like begging NASCAR to still be there, is not so far removed to where I can almost understand the Glen agreeing to this date because there might still be some feeling that it's either this or nothing, and this is still way better than nothing. Kind of paint a picture about what that was like back then and how you think that might be affecting the thinking now with the Glen agreeing to going back to May.
Well, I think the Glen had no choice. They were going to take what was given them, period. Look, the heyday of the sport was in the early 90s, in the days of Dale Sr., the Intimidator, the grassroots drivers, Rusty Wallace, Mark Martin, a brash Jeff Gordon coming onto the scene and dominating for years. You had characters, Tony Stewart, you go on and on, the Petties. You don't have that anymore. You just simply don't have that anymore. And so, back in those days, the number that they kept talking about as far as attendance was about 125 to 150,000 at the track, which was believable. Anyone who covered a race in the late 80s or early 90s, and I know you, when you worked in Binghamton, probably were there a time or two, traffic getting in and out of there was a nightmare. Even when we left 3-4 hours after the race, it was a nightmare, worse than a Bills game. I don't think that's the case anymore. And so that's reflective of the dwindling numbers as far as attendance. I think NASCAR probably told Watkins Glen, this is the date, you're going to be happy with it, and they moved on. But I don't think the sport gave much thought as to all the campers, and I keep going back to the campers. It's a few thousand people that camp, either at the state park or on the grounds of the track. And it's going to be all mud, whether they have rain that week or not, just because of late April into early May is always rain soaked as far as the ground saturation is in that region.
You're as connected with this region as anyone, and certainly the expertise in NASCAR is a big part of this too. Give me the long-term result of this. Let's say NASCAR says this is going to be the date forever. Can Watkins Glen afford, whether you're talking about the track or the region, afford to continue to have one of their best tourist events in what is probably a bad date? And will there come a point where maybe the juice is no longer worth the squeeze, where if NASCAR says this or nothing, the Glen would consider nothing?
I would hate to think that would happen. The Glen will always be that iconic road course. They can draw other circuits there, but we know what's happened with that over the years. Look at with the Indy League. I mean, I went to 2 or 3 of those races, and they were horrible. I mean, there's no energy. There was no excitement there whatsoever. And this is back when IRL, I think Danica was maybe driving at that point. I can't remember. But I'm just telling you, it's just bizarre. It's been a rough year for the Glen. They were supposed to have a big wine festival at the track, and it got canceled like 2 or 3 weeks out. And that was supposed to be at the track, and no explanation was really given for that. And then we get news of this yesterday. Watkins Glen will always be an appealing region for the natural beauty, first and foremost. Long before F1 raced at that iconic road course, and long before they raced in the streets and the hilltops of the Finger Lakes area down in Watkins Glen, they had the natural beauty. And that's what draws people from far and wide, from people across New York State, America, and across the world. They go there to see the natural beauty and other areas, Ithaca, other areas in New York State and our parts. But the racing has been woven into the fabric of that community for a very long time now. And big picture, I don't expect NASCAR to be racing there maybe 6-7 years from now. I think they'll be gone. But I think the sport's got bigger problems. I think they are trying anything they can to be relevant again. And this may be just, putting that street course in San Diego. That to me says they're just trying to do anything they can to get some buzz. We'll see what happens.
It is weird too that there seemed to be a further embrace of road courses and the NASCAR rotation than there was 15 years ago when Watkins Glen was again scratching and clawing to be a part of this, and pushing Watkins Glen, one of those road courses that has been there forever, to a date that's very obviously not good for them, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. John Kucko Digital, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, they used to say back in the day that, it's good to have presence in the Northeast market. They were in the Poconos, and they were at Watkins Glen, and they were in New Hampshire. And, Watkins Glen, New York, you're only 3 hours from Philadelphia, 3.5 hours from New York City, 5 hours from Boston. You and I both know we between us did a lot of races there, and usually back in the day we were the only station there. You had to fight to get the Syracuse stations there on a couple of those summers, so that really didn't pan out well for NASCAR as far as their mindset was, being in that Northeast New York market in the heart of the Finger Lakes. I don't know. I think this is a bad move all around. And by the way, it's Mother's Day of all days. Not good.
We spent 10 minutes on this, didn't even talk about that once. John Kucko Digital. You can catch him on Facebook, Instagram, lots of other places. Thanks for checking in, man. I appreciate it. Won't be the last time you're on this show.
The Endgame with Thad Brown, streaming exclusively on Rochester First.